So welcome to Israel International's Voice of Torah podcast. I'm Gaddi Efrayim, and it's an honor to guide you through today's profound exploration of Tikkun Brit Hadashah in connection with Parshat Toldot, drawing upon the timeless wisdom of the sages. Today, we delve into a fascinating and deeply mystical theme: the secret of the twins, the light of Jacob's soul world of Tikkun, and the darkness of Esau's soul world of Tohu. In this context, the Kabbalistic concept of Krupot, spiritual shells that obscure divine light, plays a key role. Esau's soul veiled in darkness presents the external forces that must be refined and redeemed. Two pivotal theological Jacob's signs as the embodiment of spiritual rectification. Jacob and Esau represent two spiritual archetypes. The sages highlight that Klipot soul of Yeshu, Jesus of Esav, symbolized distorted light, while soul of Yisrael HaTzaddik of Jacob represents the mission of Torah and peaceful rectification. Pivotal themes from these. Let's delve into a mystica from the sages regarding the twin spiritual archetypes of Jesus of Esau or Edom and Jewish Yeshua HaTzaddik soul of Jacob. The tension between Jacob's and Esau's hands. This tension is not just a historical or theological abstraction. It reflects a dynamic still relevant today. As some Jewish this way, some thinkers have observed, the spread of the Christian system, often associated with Esau, was frequently marked by force and conquest, Esau's hands, in contrast to the peaceful dissemination of Torah values embodied by Jacob's voice. Yeshu of Esav represents the distortion of divine light, a system associated with material dominance and force, often referred to as the Christian system. Pivotal themes from this system historically reflected the traits of Esau's hands, dominion through might and the sword. Jewish Yeshua HaTzaddik of Jacob embodies the soul of the Tzaddik, rooted with pivotal themes from this rooted in the voice of Torah and prayer, and the mission of revealing light through peaceful means and spiritual refinement. The sages emphasize the tension between these archetypes. To Jevdal from this the voice of Jacob represents the dissemination of divine wisdom and Torah values, while the hands of Esau signify reliance on force, reflecting the chaos of the world of Tohu. Pivotal themes from this thank yous on this journey into the depths of Tikkun Brit Hadashah and Parshat Toldot. Let us strive to amplify Jacob's voice, refine our own spiritual paths to pivotal themes from these, and bring the divine light to every corner of the world. Be blessed, and may the voice of inspire and elevate us all. Thank you.
Okay, get this. We're going to do a deep dive, right, into these figures people mix up, but they have huge GE implications. Yeshu of Christianity and the Jewish Yeshua HaTzaddik. And hold on, because we're also looking at some really interesting ideas. From Beit Yisrael International and a Gaddi Efrayim about Judaism and Christianity, including like this wild idea that Christianity, even though it kind of went its own way from Jewish principles, might actually be part of some bigger divine plan. Ready.
It's amazing how all this goes back to Jacob and Esau, right? Mm-hmm. Those twins from the Torah portion, Parshat Toldot, they weren't just brothers, They were like these contrasting spiritual archetypes, almost like blueprints for different ways of approaching the world and spirituality.
Okay, so break it down, like, for anyone listening who might not, be familiar with all these terms. What exactly do these spiritual blueprints look like?
Imagine this. Jacob. He's all about tikkun, harmony. Fixing what's broken, bringing things back into balance. He's the studious one, right? Focused on spiritual growth. Esau. He's Tohu. Raw energy, untamed. More impulsive, right? Physical world, hunter, man of action. And what Beit Yisrael International, guided by Gaddi Efrayim, suggests is this tension between Tikkun and Tohu. These two fundamental forces. They play out in the figures of Yeshu and the Jewish Yeshua HaTzaddik.
So we're talking about Yeshu, who Christians know as Jesus, and then Yeshua HaTzaddik, a figure in Jewish tradition. Similar names, but two completely different figures, according to Beit Yisrael International.
Exactly, and that difference is super important, especially if we want to understand how Judaism and Christianity relate historically. Beit Yisrael International points out that Yeshu, aligned with Esau's energy, sadly became a figure under whom Jewish persecution occurred. A painful part of history. We have to acknowledge that.
For sure, and I know this is a sensitive topic, so I just want to say, we are not here to condone any kind of persecution or to minimize the suffering. We're simply trying to explore, different perspectives and understand how this history maybe fits into a larger, even a divine narrative.
Absolutely. And that's where the Jewish Yeshua HaTzaddik comes in. He's a different path, reflecting Jacob's light. He emphasizes Torah, holiness, a way of life focused on spiritual connection and ethical conduct.
So almost like these two figures, they embody the two paths that Jacob and Esau represent, but playing out on this huge historical and spiritual scale.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And this is where we get the perspective of the Rambam, a really prominent Jewish scholar. He saw Christianity as a major stumbling block, as a deviation from core Jewish beliefs about the Messiah. and he thought it ultimately led to suffering for the Jewish people, which, given the history of anti-Semitism, often rooted in distorted interpretations of Christian theology, makes a lot of sense.
It does, but then Gaddi Efrayim comes in with a really interesting, maybe even controversial twist on this whole idea. He seems to suggest that even these painful parts of history, even the things Rambam was concerned about, might be part of a bigger divine plan.
That's right. Ephraim, working with Beit Yisrael International, proposes that God might be using even these seemingly chaotic energies, these events that, from our human perspective, seem so negative, to prepare the world for something much greater. It's complex, for sure, worth unpacking.
Okay, let's unpack it. You're saying that even though Christianity went a different way than Judaism, it might still be playing a role in some larger, incomprehensible divine plan.
Yeah, that's the core idea. Beit Yisrael International isn't downplaying the pain and suffering. They're offering a different way to look at history, one suggesting that even in those difficult chapters, something positive might be getting planted.
So how could Christianity, which Rambam saw as like this huge departure from Judaism, end up having this potentially positive role? It seems almost paradoxical.
That's what makes this so fascinating. Beit Yisrael International says that Christianity, even though it diverged, ended up spreading concepts like the Messiah, the importance of the Torah, belief in one God all across the globe. Ideas from Judaism, but carried through Christianity to places that might never have encountered them otherwise.
So it's like Christianity accidentally became a massive spreader of seeds. Like even if the planting wasn't, done with the purest intentions, the seeds still landed in fertile ground and took root in all kinds of ways.
That's one way to see it. It's scattering seeds without knowing where they'll land or how they'll grow.
Yeah.
And Beit Yisrael International says that spreading these core concepts, Messiah, Torah, one God, it's laid the groundwork for a future where, imagine this, nations might recognize and serve the Creator together.
Whoa, okay. I see where you're going. So even though the path was painful, full of conflict, the ultimate destination might be this incredible unity, right? A recognition of these shared values that go beyond just one specific religion.
Precisely. And that's where the Jewish Yeshua HaTzaddik is so important. He's not just a figure from the past. He's potentially this bridge between worlds, embodying those values and pointing towards reconciliation.
And I can't forget that powerful statement, right, attributed to Yeshua HaTzaddik, I am the light of the world. How does Beit Yisrael International interpret that in all this?
They see his mission as an act of Mizrat Nefesh, this really profound concept of self-sacrifice, bringing light into a world that had, in their view, moved away from those core principles of Torah and holiness. It's like bringing a spark to a place that's been in darkness for too long.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around all this. So if I'm following you, Yeshua HaTzaddik, embodying that light of Jacob, goes into this world that's maybe a bit lost, a bit disconnected, to try to elevate souls and bring everyone back to this place of unity and shared purpose.
Yes. And it's interesting how this mirrors Jacob going into Lavan's house biblically. Lavan represented a kind of spiritual exile, right? A place far from Jacob's center.
So Yeshua HaTzaddik, like Jacob, goes into this spiritual exile to spread that light of redemption and bring everyone back to a place of unity, serving the divine together. It's a big gap to bridge.
It is. And what's fascinating is that Beit Yisrael International suggests his teachings, if you strip away the layers of interpretation and dogma that came later, especially from the Romans, might actually offer a path for both Jews and non-Jews to connect much more deeply. Finding that common ground, recognizing those principles that unite us, even across historical and theological differences.
It's like we're looking at this tapestry, right? We've got Jacob and Esau, Yeshu and Yeshua HaTzaddik, Rambam's worries, and Ephraim's more hopeful perspective. And Beit Yisrael International is showing how it's all woven together, right, into this much bigger, more intricate design.
It is a complex picture, definitely.
Yeah.
But what's starting to come out is this recognition that even events we might see as negative, even periods of really intense pain, might have a purpose we don't fully grasp.
And at the heart of it all, at least according to Beit Yisrael International and Gaddi Efrayim, is this idea. The light of Jacob's soul, embodied by the Jewish Yeshua HaTzaddik, offers a path to healing and reconciliation, a way for everyone to come together in service to something way bigger than themselves.
A powerful message. It challenges us to look past the surface, to consider that history might be unfolding in a way that's beyond our human understanding.
It's a lot to take in, honestly, and it makes you wonder what role do WE play in all this? How can we as individuals create more unity, more understanding, more recognition of of shared values and purpose?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's one each of us needs to grapple with as we go through life, trying to make sense of this complex world. It's interesting, how these ideas about bridging divides, they resonate with Rabbi Riskin's work. He was really passionate about building those bridges between Judaism and Christianity.
Yeah.
Saw the potential for finding that common ground.
I've heard about Rabbi Riskin. Can you remind me what were some of his key contributions to this dialogue?
Rabbi Riskin, he believed that at their core, both Judaism and Christianity shared these really key ethical values, right? Acting justly, working toward Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. Huge potential, he thought, for collaboration in things like social justice, humanitarian aid,
So he recognized the historical issues, the pain caused by Christian anti-Semitism, but he still thought that by focusing on shared roots, seeing Yeshua as a Jewish teacher, that could actually open up space for understanding and positive dialogue.
Absolutely. He saw potential for healing, moving past those wounds from the past to build a better future together, not erasing history, but finding a way forward, building on shared values. That resonates so much with what Beit Yisrael International and Gaddi Efrayim are saying.
It's like reclaiming the teachings of Yeshua HaTzaddik, right? Taking away the later Roman interpretations. A pathway to reconciliation, getting back to the source, to what he was really trying to teach.
Peeling back layers, right? History, interpretation, like an archaeological dig, to rediscover that core message. And what emerges is this figure so deeply Jewish, a teacher emphasizing love, compassion, and living in line with Torah.
We're unearthing this lost treasure, this wisdom that could actually bring people together and not tear them apart, which is like the whole point of this episode.
Remember how we talked about Christianity spreading those seeds? Messiah, Torah, one God, across the world. Beit Yisrael International suggests those seeds. They found fertile ground in those Jewish principles and blossomed into something new. Something that, like we said, might help to mend that divide between the two traditions.
So it's not just tea about conflict, about going separate ways. It's also about these shared roots, shared values, and maybe even a shared future.
Exactly. That's what makes this so interesting. It makes us rethink how we see the relationship between Judaism and Christianity.
Wow, we've covered a lot. From Jacob and Esau to Rambam's warnings, Ephraim's more intriguing take. It's a lot to process. What are the main takeaways for our listeners today?
I think the biggest one is history is complicated. It's messy, full of twists and turns that we don't get. But within that complexity, there might be a divine plan at work, a plan that, as Ephraim suggests, might be using even the toughest stuff to move us towards something good, toward greater unity.
Like we're being asked to trust that even when things seem really dark, when there's pain, there's a purpose. And that purpose leads to something more positive, more whole.
And that's where faith comes in, right? Not blind faith. Faith based on reason, a deep understanding of our traditions, and a willingness to look beyond the surface, see how it's all connected, even the things that seem totally opposite.
So recognizing we're all part of this big tapestry, woven together by history, by faith, by being human, and even threads that clash, they might actually be making a beautiful pattern, a harmonious one.
It's a pattern that's still being made. We're not just watching, we're part of it. Our choices, what we do, even talking about this stuff, trying to build bridges, it all matters for the final outcome.
That's a lot of responsibility, but it's empowering. Knowing we can play a role, that we can help create a better future, that gives me hope.
It should. And it reminds us that even with all the chaos in the world, there's still this light calling us towards unity, compassion, and a deeper understanding of why we're here.
That light, that spark of Jacob's soul we talked about earlier, do you think it's in all of us? Connecting us to something bigger, to that vision of a world where we overcome differences, where the past can heal, where everyone comes together in harmony.
I do believe that. And that's the beautiful thing about deep dives like this. They make us curious, they challenge us, and they invite us into conversations that can bring more understanding, more empathy, more connection.
It's not just tea about learning stuff. It's about taking that knowledge and making it into wisdom, a way of seeing the world and our place in it that inspires us to act, to build those bridges, and to help heal the world.
Thinking about all this history, faith, unity, it really comes back to Yeshua HaTzaddik, doesn't it? This Jewish figure who maybe, just maybe, holds the key to bridging Judaism and Christianity.
It does, yeah. We went from Jacob and Esau to Tikkun and Tohu. We looked at Rambam and Ephraim with his take on things. But it all circles back. Who was Yeshua HaTzaddik, really? What was he actually teaching? And how do we even separate that from how Christianity evolved over the centuries? Feels like a huge piece of this whole puzzle.
A huge question. Scholars, theologians, they've been working on this for centuries. But what's exciting now is this renewed interest in the historical Yeshua, the Jewish teacher who, walked the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. Like, we're trying to peel back layers and layers of interpretation to get to what he was really saying.
So like an archaeological dig, but for spiritual truth?
Exactly. We're sifting through all this tradition, looking for that bedrock. And what we're finding is someone so deeply rooted in Judaism, this teacher who emphasized love, compassion, living in accordance with Torah.
Like we're rediscovering this lost treasure, wisdom that could bring people together, not divide them, which is what this whole deep dive has been about, really.
And that's the invitation for you listening, as you go deeper into these ideas, to be part of this rediscovery, to approach these texts, these traditions, with curiosity, with a willingness to look beyond the surface, ask questions, challenge what you think you know, seek deeper understanding.
Not just of Yeshua HaTzaddik, but our own WN faiths, right? How they fit into this bigger human story of looking for meaning, connection, purpose. It brings us back to this idea of a divine plan. That maybe even the bad stuff, the painful stuff in history, is part of something we just can't fully grasp yet.
Takes faith, yeah. But not blind faith, faith based on reason, on understanding our traditions deeply and being open to what might be possible. And that's what this has been about, looking at different views, exploring complex ideas, maybe even changing how you think about history, faith, the future.
Quite a journey, for sure. Started with those twins, Jacob and Esau, then those spiritual types, Tikkun and Tohu, Rambam's warnings, Ephraim's more optimistic take. And it all led to Yeshua HaTzaddik, who really embodies this potential to bridge the gaps, create a more unified, harmonious world. A lot to think about.
What's inspiring to me is that this isn't just some heady intellectual thing. It has real impact. It asks us to look at the world, all the conflict and division, and say, okay, how can I build bridges? How can I help create a world that reflects those values Yeshua HaTzaddik embodied: love, compassion, unity?
It's a call to action. Take what we've learned here and actually use it in our own lives, how we treat each other, how we participate in our communities in the world.
We're going to be talking about Jewish mystical interpretations of Yeshua. You probably know him as Jesus.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at the notes and teachings from Beit Yisrael International. They're guided by Gaddi Efrayim's insights. And you know what makes this so fascinating to me is how Jewish mysticism grapples with this figure. A figure that kind of bridges Jewish roots and a legacy that's often seen through, well, a very different lens.
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher, right?
Yeah.
You have this person so deeply connected to Judaism, but whose image has mostly been formed outside of Jewish tradition. I mean, it's a real puzzle how to reconcile those two sides. But, when you try to reconcile them, it brings up some really interesting ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Right off the bat, just the names themselves, Yeshua versus Yeshu, Beit Yisrael International is pointing out that this difference is really like loaded with meaning in Jewish thought.
Oh, it totally is. In Jewish tradition, Yeshu is often understood as, what it stands for, right? May his name and memory be erased. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions thinking this is some kind of historical cover-up, it's important to understand the historical context, right? I mean, we're talking about a period when early Jewish communities really felt like their traditions and their way of life were under threat.
So using that name was almost like a defensive move, like a protective measure.
Exactly. A spiritual fence, you could say. The sages erected this fence around their beliefs, especially as Christianity started to emerge with its own separate doctrines. So it wasn't about denying Yeshua's existence. It was more about protecting Jewish practice from what they saw as, well, potentially harmful influences.
Right. You can imagine how during that time, keeping Jewish tradition strong felt super important, especially with all those outside pressures.
Absolutely. And you see echoes of this protective instinct in the Talmud. I mean, when the Talmud mentions figures connected with early Christian teachings, it's often as a warning against beliefs that the rabbis saw as heretical, which, highlights their concern for the Jewish community's spiritual well-being.
So this name Yeshu, as Beit Yisrael International explains, it carries a lot of historical baggage, right? It represents this deep deep concern for protecting Jewish identity in a world that's constantly changing.
Yeah, for sure. But here's where things get really interesting. Gaddi Efrayim, through his teachings at Beit Yisrael International, suggests that even Yeshu, even that name, can be redeemed, as part of a larger messianic process.
No, hold on now. That's a thought-provoking idea. Redeeming a name that's meant to, like, erase memory, it seems almost like a contradiction.
Right. But remember, Jewish mysticism, especially Kabbalah, is all about uncovering these hidden sparks of holiness, like finding them in the most unexpected places. It works on this principle that even in teachings or in figures that seem far from traditional Judaism, there might be divine truths waiting to be rediscovered, truths that can then be reconnected to their source in Israel.
So even within what might be considered distortions, at least from a traditional Jewish point of view, there's still the possibility for something positive to come out. That's pretty radical.
It is, isn't it? But it speaks to this core idea in Jewish mystical thought that God works in ways that we don't always immediately understand.
I see where you're going with this. But how does this connect back to Yeshua specifically? How do you even begin to redeem a name that carries so much weight?
Okay, to get this, we need to go back to the Torah, to the story of Balaam. Remember him. He was hired to curse the Israelites, but ended up blessing them instead.
Oh, yeah. God stepped in and totally flipped the script.
Exactly. And Gaddi Efrayim is saying that this story gives us a really strong parallel. For understanding how Jewish mystical thought approaches Yeshua's legacy among non-Jewish nations, it's seen as a kind of spiritual exile where these sparks of holiness are scattered outside their intended place.
Oh, okay. So even though interpretations of Yeshua outside of traditional Judaism might be seen as kind of going astray, they could still serve a good purpose in the end. Kind of like those unintended blessings from Balaam.
That's the idea. It's not about saying that those interpretations perfectly line up with traditional Jewish understanding, but it is about acknowledging that within them there might be a divine purpose that we haven't fully grasped yet, a potential for good that might not be obvious at first glance.
That's a very different way of looking at it. It's like stumbling upon a hidden treasure in the most unlikely spot.
Exactly. And that's where this whole concept of the Tzaddik, the righteous soul, comes into play.
Now you're talking the Tzaddik. Those stories are always fascinating. But how does this righteous soul archetype connect to Yeshua and to this whole idea of his teachings being in a kind of exile?
Well, you'll have to wait to find out, because that's where we're picking up next time.
All right. So last time we were talking about the Tzaddik, the righteous soul, and how that figure ties into Yeshua's story. So how does it all connect? Fill me in.
Okay, so the Tzaddik is like this really central figure in Jewish mystical thought, especially in Kabbalah. These righteous souls, they're believed to descend into lower spiritual realms. But it's not like a punishment or anything. They go there with a mission.
What kind of mission?
Their mission is to elevate the fallen sparks of holiness. They're there to do some good.
So it's not about being banished to some spiritual wasteland. It's more like actively going into the mess to fix it.
You got it. Think of them like spiritual first responders. They go where they're needed the most, driven by compassion, wanting to bring light into those dark corners. And Gaddi Efrayim, through his work with Beit Yisrael International, suggests that this is exactly what Yeshua's exile among the nations is about.
Hold on. Are you saying Yeshua might be seen as a tzaddik, like someone who took on this mission to bring sparks of holiness back home? That's a pretty bold interpretation.
It is bold, but it fits so well with Jewish mystical thought. Remember, we're talking about a tradition that sees redemption everywhere, even where you least expect it.
That reminds me, you mentioned Tikkun Olam earlier, repairing the world. Could you explain that a bit more?
Sure. Tikkun Olam means literally repairing the world. It's a huge concept in Judaism, and especially in Kabbalah. It's about recognizing that the world's not perfect, there's brokenness, and we all have a part to play in fixing it, making it whole again.
So it's not just hoping things will get better, but actively making them better.
You got it. And that making things better includes getting those scattered sparks of holiness back where they belong, aligned with the divine will. That's where Yeshua comes in. Beit Yisrael International, following Gaddi Efrayim's insights, proposes that the ultimate repair involves fully bringing his identity back into Jewish tradition, revealing him as Jewish Yeshua HaTzaddik, the righteous soul who fulfills his purpose within the framework of Torah.
Wow, you're blowing my mind here. You're saying this figure, whose story has been told and retold so many times, might be understood as a tzaddik working toward Tikkun Olam. and that his journey ultimately brings him back to his Jewish roots.
That's the heart of it. It really makes us think, right? Look beyond the surface and see those deeper connections that run through history and spirituality.
Yeah, like those hidden picture puzzles. You got to really look closely to see what's there.
Exactly. And this reintegration, it's not some abstract idea. It's a process, a dynamic one with lots of moving parts. We're talking about teachings that have been interpreted and reinterpreted over centuries.
So how do we even begin to untangle all that? How can we trace those scattered sparks and figure out how they fit into this big puzzle of Tikkun Olam?
Well, Jewish mystical thought doesn't shy away from complexity. It embraces it. But to navigate it, there are key concepts we got to understand, like shavera, which literally means shattering.
Shattering. Okay, now I'm really curious, but also a little scared. What exactly is getting shattered here?
So Kabbalah teaches that during creation, the vessels holding divine light, they shattered. This scattering of sparks led to exile, a separation from the original unity.
So it's like this cosmic explosion sending bits of the divine flying everywhere.
Yeah, kinda. But the shavira, it's not a bad thing. It's seen as a necessary step in creation. It created the potential for diversity, for those sparks to go on unique journeys, even if those journeys seem to lead them far from their origin.
That's an interesting way to look at it. So are you saying these different interpretations of Yeshua, even those far from Jewish tradition, are part of this big cosmic scattering?
Exactly what Gaddi Efrayim and Beit Yisrael International are saying. These sparks, even if they seem hidden, they're part of the Tikkun Olam.
It's like all those different paths ultimately lead back to unity, to reintegration.
That's a deep thought. It leads us to the core of this discussion. How do we understand Yeshua's teachings, especially those outside traditional Judaism, in this whole Tikkun Olam process?
Okay, now you've really got me hooked. How do we make sense of all this without getting totally lost?
To figure that out, we need to look at another key concept, the Zohar. It's a central text in Kabbalah. It's got some fascinating insights about these scattered sparks and how they can be redeemed.
Bring on the Zohar. What does it have to say about exile and reintegration?
Ah, that's a story for next time. We'll dive into the Zohar secrets then.
All right, let's crack open the Zohar. Last time we were talking about Shavera, the shattering of vessels that scattered those sparks of holiness, and how Yeshua's journey and legacy might fit into that whole picture. So what does the Zohar actually say about all this?
Well, the Zohar. It's this incredibly dense, mystical text, full of symbolism and allegory, not exactly a light read, but it does offer some really powerful insights into this idea of exile and redemption. One of the key things it emphasizes is that even though these sparks are scattered, they haven't lost their holiness.
So it's not like they become corrupted. Like they don't lose their divine nature just because they're scattered. They're still carrying that light, that potential for good, even in exile.
Exactly. Like imagine diamonds covered in dust. Their essence is still precious, even if it's obscured. And the Zohar, it actually talks about these sparks being taken captive by foreign nations, waiting to be redeemed.
Okay, so taken captive. That sounds a little harsh. Like, is this some cosmic blame game?
No. Remember, the Zohar is very symbolic. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about understanding how holiness gets hidden and how it can be revealed.
Oh, I see. So instead of viewing this captivity as something negative, it's more like a necessary stage in the journey of these sparks back to their source.
You got it. And it highlights something that both the Zohar and Gaddi Efrayim emphasize. Recognizing the divine purpose, even in what might look like distortions. Like, think back to Balaam again. He wanted to curse, but God turned his words into blessings.
Right. It's like this cosmic principle where even things that seem to be going against the grain can actually serve a greater good.
Exactly. And this brings us back to Yeshua and this idea of his reintegration. Beit Yisrael International, they're drawing on Kabbalah and Gaddi Efrayim's teachings. And they suggest that recognizing the holiness within those interpretations of Yeshua, even the ones outside of traditional Judaism, is part of this process. It's about seeing those sparks of light, even if they're covered in dust.
So it's not about erasing or invalidating those interpretations. It's more about understanding them within this broader context of exile and redemption, right?
You got it. It's about acknowledging that these diverse interpretations, even if they seem to clash with traditional Jewish understanding, they've played a part in how this whole cosmic story has unfolded. They've helped to spread those sparks of holiness, even if those sparks haven't been fully brought back to their source yet.
Okay, that's a very different way of looking at it. It's not about saying one interpretation is right and another is wrong, but recognizing the potential for unity, like amidst all this apparent diversity.
Exactly. And that recognition is a crucial step in Tikkun Olam. Remember, Repairing the world isn't just about fixing external problems, it's also about healing those internal divisions, the things that separate us from each other and from the divine.
Makes me think about how we often focus on the differences between religions and spiritual traditions, highlighting the conflicts instead of what connects us.
Yeah, it's a very human thing to do, isn't it? Focusing on what separates us rather than what unites us. But these mystical teachings, they're inviting us to shift our perspective. They're encouraging us to look for those hidden sparks of holiness, those points of connection, even in places that seem really far from our own understanding.
So if we apply that to this discussion about Yeshua, it's not about trying to put him in a box or claiming ownership of his legacy. It's more about recognizing the different ways his teachings have resonated with people across different cultures, across time.
Beautifully put. It's about acknowledging this tapestry of interpretations, each one contributing something unique to this cosmic story. And ultimately, it's about seeing the potential for everything to be brought back together, revealing the underlying unity of the divine plan.
It's a powerful image. And it leaves me with this question. How do we as individuals play a part in this reintegration? Does it just happen on a cosmic level? Or can we actively do something?
That's a great question. Jewish mystical thought suggests that it's both. There's a sense of divine orchestration, a cosmic dance that's been going on forever. But we're not just watching this dance, we're in it. Every act of kindness, every attempt to understand, every bridge we build between people, all of it contributes to Tikkun Olam.
So even our small actions can have a ripple effect. They contribute to this larger process of healing and coming together.
Exactly. And within that framework, even teachings that seem really far from our own understanding can actually be seen as contributing to this reintegration, to bringing everything back to its source. It's about expanding our compassion to include those who seem different from us, recognizing that spark of the divine in everyone we meet.
Wow. What an inspiring message to end on. Call to move beyond judgment and separation and embrace a more inclusive, expansive view of spirituality.
Absolutely. And it's a journey that starts within each of us as we learn to see those sparks of holiness, not just in others, but in ourselves as well.
And if you want to go deeper, check out Beit Yisrael International, Gaddi Efrayim's work. Learn more about Rabbi Riskin's efforts, too. Keep asking those questions, seeking those answers. Have those tough conversations that can lead to understanding each other better, connecting more deeply.
Thanks for being with us on this deep dive. Hope it sparked your curiosity, got you thinking about these ideas. And we want to hear from you. What's stuck with you? What's still bugging you? Share your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation going.